So let's talk about horses.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of history there as
Yeah.
well. And again, my daughter was telling me on the way down something about you were riding before you're walking. And
Yeah.
I can relate. My dad actually used to break horses for cash, and I can remember.
Okay, so you know.
Yeah, I can remember getting thrown on a 17-hand thoroughbred,
Right.
you know, when I was like 3 or 4 years old.
Right.
And so I was like, you know, like horses were the way, so I
Right.
get it. But tell me about, you know, your connection with horses, and what is Horses First? Give it a plug.
Yeah, so basically, you know, again, going back to, you know, small age, I was riding horses like, you know, before I could walk. Literally, horses have been a part of my family, you know, before I was even born. So it just kind of came naturally that horses would be, you know, part of my life, and stayed, you know, through up now. You know, I've rescued horses, you know, to this day, and fight for them when it comes to anything. Like I've been working on the SAFE Act, which is to ban horse slaughter. I've been working on that on Capitol Hill since 2009. Which is, you know, good, but it's actually sad to say that we're still trying to work to get this bill passed. The same thing, the Wild Horses Borough Act, and working with Return to Freedom, and lobby with Chris Hyde, who's a big animal lobbyist, and we lobby and we fight for these animal rights, because people don't realize it's great to do protests, it's great to do all of that. I mean, you know, to continue to try to be a compassionate person, but the way things get done is you have to, unfortunately, go on the Hill, and that's how, you know, changes are really made.
Yeah.
And as frustrating as it is, you know, and all these bills are bipartisan, you know, so both sides of the fence, you know, you'd be shocked, you know, how, I'm going to say it, but corrupt, you know, it can be, you know, because there's a lot of times when we think we're going to get this bill passed, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, that person owed that person a favor, that person, you know, loves horses, but they don't care that, you know, I probably don't have to tell you that. So it's just frustrating. So we're going to keep, you know, plugging away. We keep lobbying. We, you know, I've talked to so many congressmen, you know, and obviously on the Senate side as well, to try to get this done. And we always think we're really close. We've always got great, you know, congressmen that sponsor the bills, but then sometimes we're just short, and then it never even goes to the floor. So we got to just keep pushing away. I know that people, you know, support what we do, like I said, both sides, but it's just an uphill battle. And to be honest with you, sometimes we wonder if it'll never, you know, get past, but that won't stop us fighting.
So, you know, you kind of took my segue for me there into wild horses, you know. And let me back up a little bit and just ask you, it's a politically fraught issue. It's complicated. There's different trains of thought. There's different camps, you know, and there's one camp, maybe they're environmental purists, and they say, well, it's debatable whether it's even an indigenous species here, so it shouldn't be out there. There's another camp that says basically, you know, hey, this country was built on the back of the wild horse, and there used to be 2 million of them, and I can take them over cattle any day. So there's that camp. And then of course there's the camp that's like, oh, they suffer and starve in the winter, and so we gotta get them all out of there, or only have a few. Where do you come
that's
down?
The last one you said is BS, you know, so we know that. You know, I would say the second one, what you said, because I mean, these horses have been there. They are what America, when you think of America, you think of the wild horses, you know, and they go back, you know, thousands and thousands of years. They were here before us, and they've been able to roam and be able to defend themselves, be able to live off the land. So for them to say that they're starving, and you know, all that is a bunch of crap. But the BLM, I should say the Bureau of Land Management, you know, they always give us a hard time because we come up with solutions. The main thing is, like, people complain. You have to give solutions, and we give solutions. You know, now we're trying to do this fertility control, where we would dart the horses, the mares, and so they wouldn't be able to produce, obviously, because they're always talking about the overpopulation. So that is the biggest thing that we're trying to do, is that after they round them up, which are those horrific helicopter roundups, that we have a solution. Plus, every time we go into you know, different, you know, offices of these congressmen, or, you know, we're talking to the staffers or chief of staff, it's like we're giving them tons. I mean, I'm talking thousands of rescues that would take these horses for therapy, for equine therapy, for disabled children, for veterans, for women who are domestic violence survivors.
And there's a pretty big backlog now, right?
Oh, yeah, but we've got it's not to say we don't have a place for them. You know, I've had one senator who told me, you know, if we do that, then, you know, they'll be walking through, you know, DC, you know, if we don't start to kill them. It's like, no, I mean, it's like, come on.
They always say they're going to come into the urban
into the
interfaces.
cities, yeah. and that's not, horses aren't doing that. You know, those wild horses, if you've seen them in the Mustangs, they like to stay, you know, actually away from people. So we've given them a lot of solutions and ways, you know, and we're always looking for, the biggest thing is we're always looking for landowners that have not a couple acres, we're talking about thousands of acres, that they can take a small herd, you know, of horses to help. And so we can, you know, because sometimes they end up in these roundups, and then you know what happens.
Who are the big players there, like Ted Turner, or who, you know, who do you go to?
That's the thing. There's not. You know, we've got a lot of some, you know, some rich, you know, oilmen in Texas that help us, and there's some, you know, others that are, you know, I've had some horse ranches that are in the racehorse industry that, you know, have helped us. I mean, there's a lot. You'd be shocked, even some people in rodeo who have actually helped us take some of these horses, and then they break them, you know, and they're able to, you know, use them for, you know, some people may not like that because they're not putting them back into the wild. They're breaking them and making them horses that people ride, you know, but they're still in a better situation than they would be. So there's a lot of different ways and solutions that we have, but the BLM always seems to cut corners, say they want to do it, then say it's too expensive. No, if you really look at what we're trying to do, it'll save money. And by using the fertility control with these horses. Right.
The PCP, right? Is that what they use?
Yep.
And so, you know, this whole strategy of the BLM, or really the Department of Interior at large, and saying, you know, the way to manage these animals, you know, in the case of wild horses, they designate these HMAs, and they say, oh, we only want 25 or 50,000 of them out there. Is that completely backwards in your view, or is, you know, should they take that approach at all? Obviously, you know, all of the land is getting gobbled up.
Well, right. I guess the biggest thing is sometimes I've learned over the years spending time lobbying on the Hill is that you have to sometimes come to somewhat of an agreement. Maybe it's not going to be exactly what we want, right? You know this, but we have to meet. So there's times where we don't agree with what they're saying, but if they're going to give us a little bit, you know, and be able to work with us on the solutions that we have and the PCP and different ways to get the horses that are rounded up and bring them to different sanctuaries, and them allowing us to, then we have to meet them halfway with certain things. So do I agree with that? And, you know, a lot of activists and advocates will say, well, why did you guys agree to that? Because it's either that or nothing.
Right.
So at that point, we have to agree on something.
Politics is all about compromise.
Yeah, and that's what we try to be. You know, as much as I am an advocate, I still know that you have to be reasonable, and you have to approach is everything. You can't sit there and come and go into, you know, an office when you're lobbying and start screaming at people and say, I want this or that, or just the same thing. You know, I've always told that. I've been told so many times by congressmen and senators, the animal activists, they yell and scream. That doesn't do anything. It's actually you know, they say out of all the different things that they deal with, you know, for different legislation, they said it's the animal legislation that's the hardest, because they get phone calls, you know, for all their different constituents, like screaming
passionate
at them.
People.
And it's great to be passionate, but you know what I'm talking about? That's all about their approach. If someone, you know, was walking by and starts screaming at you and keeps screaming at you, are you just going to be like, oh, no, a lot of people are going to scream back. That's how you defend yourself. So that's why it's always like when we go into these offices, I try to be as like, okay, I get where you're coming from, but this is, you know, I try to just be a little bit more passionate, but not so vocal and screaming and
work through the channels.
Right. I kind of just now at this point know how I have to be, whether sometimes it's a little bit of an act, you know, because there's times where, of course, I go in there and I'm like, oh, well, thank you so much, Congressman. I walk out, I go, what a fucking asshole, you know what I mean? But you have to kind of, you have to, you know, play the part, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I've gone a lot more, and not just on the Hill, but in all my, you know, advocacy, you know, being an advocate and activist, I think I've gone a long way by that approach, if that makes any sense.
So speaking of the Hill and doing that work, you know, I don't know if you work with Congressman Grijalva. I know he's written some letters, but you know, it's like the battle continues over years and administrations. I get that, but is there anything right now that we should be watching for in, you know, either any of the appropriations committees or the Natural Resource Committee? What's going on currently?
Yeah, so right now everything kind of changed and got put to a halt because of COVID. As you know, that they all went on recess more than normal because of COVID, and a lot of them are working from home. Like, we're not even really allowed. We can, but we have to, like, you know, you have to set up meetings during, like, FaceTimes and, you know, the different Zooms, or sometimes we can go in, which I don't think it's as effective when you're doing a Zoom, or because as we all know, you could be You know what I mean? Doing other things. And sometimes they even turn off their camera, which I know that means they're doing other things, right? So, you know, it's nothing better as being in the office. So, you know, right now we haven't been able to lobby as much as we have, but we are just really trying to push for this fertility. That's the biggest thing with the wild horses, is to push, push, push. And so I always keep telling people, you know, yes, you can call Department of Interior or BLM, but you have to call your local congressman, your legislators. That's who you have to call, and just tell them, hey, to support this, to support the, you know, the Wild Horse Burrow Act and the SAFE Act, you know, because they go hand in hand. Because the majority of those horses, wild horses, end up in slaughter and kill lots.
Right.
So.
And so talking about the we and talking about the lobbying, there was quite a star-packed coalition that was involved with this, and I know that goes back over some years as well. Is, you know, is that coalition still together? Is it still tight?
You're talking about Horses on the Hill?
I don't know. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, Horse on the Hill, we still do that. It's where
I
different.
saw Ed Harris and Willie
yes,
Nelson.
Yes,
and,
that's still, yeah. Robert Redford, Willie Nelson. There's so many different big activists that support us. We do a thing called Horses on the Hill, which the name speaks for itself. You know, we go and different celebrity and musicians, you name it. People that are big in the public eye are able to talk about their stories, from rescuing horses to being able to what they're doing now and what we can do, and try to encourage, because you'd be surprised how much a celebrity voice goes a long way up there on the hill. They really, I don't know what it is, but they get very enamored and they get really excited, you know. Like, there's so many times where I've walked into offices and like, oh, the congressman can't, meet with you, and then, they tell him who I am, and then he's like, oh my God, I'm a big sports fan. I'll pass up those calls, and he wants to meet and talk, and then all of a sudden, I tell him how passionate I am. He's like, okay, you know what, let me look into this more. I kind of had other things I was looking at, and they do. They actually, it does help. When Bo Derek's on the hill, they actually, unfortunately, they should just know what's right or wrong, right? But no, unfortunately, it does influence them when you've got an athlete or musician or some type of celebrity, someone with notoriety comes in and tells you, I feel passionate about this, let's make a change, and why.